The wind cut through the city like a blade that morning, cold, sharp, and merciless, rattling through empty alleys and brushing against the thin blanket wrapped around a man who had learned to survive without walls. His name was Adrian, but to most people passing by, he was invisible, just another shape on the sidewalk, another bundle of worn clothes, another story no one bothered to ask. Yet on this particular day, as dawn broke with a pale, unforgiving light, something in the air felt different, heavier, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Adrian opened his eyes to the world that rarely opened its eyes to him, and he felt an ache in his chest deeper than hunger, deeper than exhaustion, the ache of being forgotten. If you believe every human deserves dignity, second chances, and kindness, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. It truly helps spread stories that matter. Adrian had once been a man plenty would envy. A steady job repairing motorcycles, a small rented room, a handful of friends who liked his easygoing laugh. But life can pivot faster than a heartbeat. One accident, one reckless driver running a red light, and Adrian's world shifted violently off its axis. The crash shattered his leg and fractured his ability to work. The months that followed were a blur of hospital visits, lost wages, medical bills that devoured what little savings he had, and eventually the landlord's quiet but firm notice taped to his door. What came next was slow, painful erosion. First the room, then the job, then his belongings piece by piece, sold to survive, until the only thing left was himself, and even that felt heavier than he could carry. The mornings on the streets were the worst. Cold seeped into his bones in ways no blanket could fight. The concrete was unforgiving, and the passing crowd even more so. People walked around him like he was a crack on the pavement, something to avoid, something unpleasant to acknowledge. Adrian never asked for much. A few coins, a small meal, or sometimes just a smile to remind him he still existed in someone else's world. But most days, he received nothing. He learned to shrink inward, to take up less space, to expect less from humanity. Yet despite everything, there was a part of Adrian that stubbornly refused to die, the part that remembered laughter, warmth, belonging. In the afternoons, he watched the world move. Children raced each other across sidewalks. Couples argued playfully. Workers rushed with coffees in hand, their eyes tired but alive. He observed from a distance, a silent spectator trapped on the outside of a life he used to know. Every day he tried to remind himself that the world wasn't cruel. It was simply too fast to notice those it left behind. On one particular morning, as he sat near a bus stop with trembling hands cupped together for warmth, he felt weaker than usual. Hunger had carved deep valleys under his cheekbones. He hadn't eaten a real meal in 2 days, and the dizziness was beginning to blur the edges of his vision. He kept his head low, half-conscious, listening to the rhythmic thump of bus wheels and distant chatter. His body swayed slightly as if even sitting upright was too much. Hours passed. People came and went. No one stopped, until someone did. She wasn't the kind of person Adrian expected. A young woman, dressed simply, with the kind of tired eyes that suggested she understood what struggle felt like. She paused in front of him, and instead of pretending she hadn't seen him, she crouched down. Adrian noticed her hands, gentle, steady, and unafraid. She asked if he was okay, but he barely managed to nod. His throat was too dry, too tight with emotion to form words. She disappeared for a moment and returned with a small bag, warm soup, a sandwich, and a bottle of water. When she placed the items in front of him, Adrian felt his breath catch. Not because of the food, though hunger clawed at him fiercely, but because someone had looked at him and seen a human being. He ate slowly, savoring not just the taste but the moment, the rare feeling of being cared for. The woman stayed near him, not hovering, not judging, just offering presence in the quiet way people do when they genuinely want to help. When Adrian finished the meal, he murmured a shaky thank you, and she smiled softly, telling him to take care. Then she walked away, blending back into the rhythm of the city, leaving behind a warmth that outlasted the food. For the first time in months, Adrian's chest felt less heavy. That single moment had cracked open a door inside him that he thought had been sealed shut. It reminded him that compassion existed, that the world wasn't entirely indifferent. And sometimes, that small reminder is all a soul needs to keep going. The days that followed were still difficult, but Adrian carried that memory like a fragile flame. He tried to sit a little straighter, tried to greet the world with just a bit more hope, even when it hurt. He found himself watching for the young woman, not to thank her again, but because her presence had become a symbol of possibility. He didn't see her again, but her kindness lingered in the air around him. Then came the moment that truly changed everything. One late afternoon, Adrian was sitting near the entrance of a small cafe, gathering the courage to ask strangers if they had leftover food. His stomach twisted with both hunger and shame. As he watched the sun dip behind buildings, a man with graying hair and a worn briefcase stepped out of the cafe. His clothes were neat but old, the kind worn by someone who had worked hard their whole life without ever earning enough to relax. The man noticed Adrian, hesitated, then approached. He didn't offer money. He didn't offer food. Instead, he offered something far more unexpected. He sat down beside Adrian on the sidewalk. No one had willingly sat next to Adrian in months. People usually kept distance, as though proximity to poverty was contagious. But this man placed his briefcase down and let out a quiet sigh that felt oddly familiar, like the sigh of someone who had faced his own storms. He began to talk in a low, reflective tone, sharing pieces of his life, how he once lost everything in a financial collapse, how he spent 6 months sleeping in his car, how people ignored him, judged him, avoided him. He spoke not to lecture but to connect, weaving his story with gentle pauses that allowed Adrian to breathe in the truth. He wasn't alone. Others had fallen, others had risen, others had survived. Then the man said something Adrian would never forget. "You may feel invisible now," he murmured, "but you're still here. And as long as you're here, your story isn't over. Someone once helped me when no one else would, and I promised myself I'd pass that forward. So today, I'm here for you." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a folded pamphlet, a local shelter program offering temporary room, meals, and job assistance. He offered to walk with Adrian there, to help him check in, to ensure he didn't feel alone in taking the first step back into society. Adrian hesitated only for a moment. Then he nodded. That evening, as he stepped into the shelter's warm, brightly lit hall, Adrian felt hope pulse through him like a heartbeat returning after a long silence. The staff welcomed him with kindness, helping him wash up, giving him clean clothes, offering him a bed that didn't sit on frozen concrete. The unfamiliar comfort brought tears he hadn't allowed himself to feel in months. The next weeks were filled with slow, meaningful shifts. He attended counseling sessions, received meals at regular hours, rebuilt strength in his injured leg through therapy, joined vocational training, and gradually pieced together fragments of the life he once had. The road wasn't easy. Some days felt heavy and discouraging, but he kept going, driven by the memory of kindness from strangers who had asked for nothing in return. Eventually, he secured a small job repairing bicycles for a community center, and though the work was humble, it filled him with purpose. The staff admired his dedication, and his gentle smile soon returned, faint but genuine. In time, he saved enough to rent a small room, a place with 4 walls, a bed, and dignity, a place with hope. Months later, on a bright morning, Adrian stood outside the same cafe where his life had begun to change. He watched people pass by, rushed, busy, unaware of the stories unfolding quietly around them. He noticed a man sitting on the sidewalk nearby, wearing layers of clothes that didn't quite fight the cold. The man's eyes held the same emptiness Adrian once carried. Without hesitation, Adrian approached him. This time, he was the one who offered food. This time, he was the one who sat down beside someone who felt invisible. This time, he carried forward the chain of compassion that had once lifted him from the depths of despair. If this story touched your heart even a little, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps spread kindness across the world. Before you go, comment below with one thing you believe every human deserves, no matter their circumstances. And remember, no one is truly invisible. One moment of kindness can change an entire life.